Dilafruz was only 24 years old, young, beautiful, modern, and like millions of people every day, she spent hours scrolling endlessly through social media. Instagram, short videos, perfect lives, perfect mothers, perfect homes, perfect happiness. At least, that's how it looked through the screen. Meanwhile, real life quietly waited beside her unnoticed. Her husband worked long hours outside the city. Most days, Dilafruz stayed home alone with their 8-month-old baby boy, Yusuf, a beautiful, cheerful child. Tiny hands, bright, curious eyes, constant laughter filling the house. Everyone said Yusuf looked exactly like his father, and whenever he smiled, Dilafruz smiled too. She truly loved her son, deeply. But love alone is not always enough, because attention matters too, and modern distraction steals attention silently. That warm afternoon, sunlight covered the quiet neighborhood softly, birds singing, trees moving gently in summer wind. Peaceful, very peaceful. Inside the house, little Yusuf played on a blanket near the living room floor. Small toys scattered around him. He laughed happily while trying to grab a colorful ball. Meanwhile, Dilafruz sat nearby on the couch, holding her phone, scrolling, watching reels, laughing softly at funny videos, replying to messages. One video became another, then another. Minutes disappeared quietly. Little Yusuf slowly began crawling farther away across the floor, curious, exploring, like babies naturally do. At first, Dilafruz glanced toward him occasionally, but gradually the phone pulled more of her attention away. A cooking video, a beauty blogger, a funny couple prank, notifications appearing constantly, tiny digital worlds replacing the real one beside her. Meanwhile, little Yusuf reached the open back door quietly. Warm sunlight touched his face. The baby smiled excitedly. Outside, the family's small inflatable water pool stood near the garden, filled with water earlier that morning because of hot weather. Only knee-deep for adults, but dangerously deep for a baby. Yusuf slowly crawled toward it innocently, tiny hands pressing against warm ground, happy sounds leaving his mouth softly. Inside the house, Dilafruz never looked up, because another video had started already. Then suddenly, everything changed. A tiny splash, very small, almost impossible to hear. Then silence, terrifying silence. No laughter anymore, no crawling sounds, nothing. Several more minutes passed. Finally, Dilafruz absent-mindedly called out softly, "Yusuf?" No answer. Still scrolling, she called again louder, "Yusuf!" Silence. Something cold suddenly moved through her chest. Slowly, she lowered the phone. The living room looked empty. The toys remained on the floor, but the baby was gone. Instant panic exploded inside her. "Yusuf!" She jumped up immediately, searching the room desperately. Kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, nothing. Then suddenly, her eyes locked onto the open back door, and her entire body froze, because outside, near the small pool, tiny baby sandals floated quietly on the water. Dilafruz stopped breathing. The world around her suddenly became silent, completely silent. Only the tiny sandals floating on the water moved softly. For one frozen second, her mind refused to understand what her eyes were seeing. Then panic exploded violently inside her chest. "Yusuf!" She ran toward the pool, screaming, barefoot, phone falling from her hands onto the floor behind her, her entire body shaking uncontrollably now. The small, inflatable pool looked harmless from far away. Tiny, ordinary. But at that moment, it became every parent's nightmare. Delafruz reached the water and looked inside, and instantly, her scream shattered the quiet neighborhood. Little Yusuf floated face down silently in the water, motionless, tiny body completely still. No, 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 no! Delafruz jumped into the pool, desperately pulling him into her arms. The baby's skin felt cold, his eyes closed, his tiny lips slightly blue. Delafruz collapsed onto the grass, holding him tightly. Please wake up! Yusuf! Her screams became uncontrollable now, broken, animal-like, the kind of screams only real terror creates. She tried shaking him gently, crying violently, her hands trembling too hard to think properly. Then, suddenly, a neighbor heard the screaming and rushed into the yard, an older woman named Robia Opa. The moment she saw the baby, her face turned pale instantly. "Call an ambulance!" she shouted, but Delafruz could barely move, barely breathe, barely understand reality anymore. Robia Opa immediately grabbed the phone from the grass and called emergency services quickly. Then she carefully laid Yusuf onto the ground, trying CPR desperately. "Come on, baby, come on!" Delafruz sat beside them, completely collapsing emotionally, repeating only one sentence over and over. "It's my fault! It's my fault!" Because deep down, she already knew the terrifying truth. Nothing distracted her physically, no emergency, no danger. Only the phone, only endless scrolling. Minutes earlier, her son had still been laughing alive inside the house. Now, everything felt unreal. The ambulance arrived terrifyingly fast. Paramedics rushed toward the child immediately. Oxygen mask, chest compressions, urgent voices, machines. Delafruz watched helplessly, shaking violently beside the yard. One paramedic finally looked toward her seriously. How long was he underwater? Delafruz opened her mouth, but no words came out, because she didn't know. She truly didn't know. And suddenly, that realization crushed her completely. A mother lost track of time while scrolling through strangers' lives and nearly lost her own child forever. Inside the ambulance, Delafruz held Yusuf's tiny wet hand, crying nonstop. Machines beeped beside him, the baby still unconscious, still silent. And for the first time in years, Instagram, messages, videos, notifications, none of it mattered anymore. Nothing mattered except one tiny heartbeat fighting to survive. At the hospital, doctors rushed Yusuf into emergency treatment immediately. Then, the waiting began, the longest waiting of Delafruz's life. Cold hospital hallway, wet clothes, broken breathing, endless guilt. And every second, the same horrifying thought repeated inside her mind. I looked away. The hospital hallway felt freezing cold, not because of temperature, because fear changes how the body feels everything. Delafruz sat alone outside the emergency room, completely soaked. Wet hair, trembling hands, eyes swollen from non-stop crying. And behind the emergency doors, her 8-month-old son fought for his life. Doctors moved quickly inside. Machines beeped constantly. Urgent voices echoed through the hallway. Every sound stabbed deeper into Delafruz's chest, because only one truth existed now. A few minutes of distraction had changed everything. Her husband, Azizbek, still knew nothing. He worked outside the city that day at a construction project, phone buried inside jacket pocket while supervising workers. Hours earlier, he had watched a video Delafruz sent proudly of little Yusuf laughing. He smiled while replaying it twice, then answered, "Take care of my boys." Now, life looked completely different. Finally, Azizbek noticed dozens of missed calls during a short break. Neighbors, unknown numbers, hospital. Instant panic hit him. He called back immediately. A nurse answered carefully. "Are you Yusuf Azizabekov's father?" The world stopped. Yes. Silence. Then the sentence every parent fears hearing. "You need to come to the hospital immediately." Azizabek didn't even remember the drive afterward. Only fear. Endless, terrifying fear. His hands shook violently on the steering wheel, thoughts racing uncontrollably. Accident? Illness? What happened? He called Dilafruz repeatedly. No answer. Because inside the hospital hallway, Dilafruz could barely function anymore. She sat, staring blankly at the emergency room doors, completely destroyed by guilt. Then suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Azizbek arrived running breathlessly. The moment he saw Dilafruz crying outside emergency, his face turned pale instantly. "Where's my son?" Dilafruz immediately broke down harder, unable to even look at him. Azizabek grabbed her shoulders desperately. "What happened?" And finally, through violent sobbing, Dilafruz whispered the words that shattered both their lives. "I looked away." Azizabek froze, confused, terrified. Dilafruz covered her face, crying uncontrollably now. "He crawled outside. I was on my phone. The pool." She couldn't finish, because reality itself felt unbearable. Azizabek slowly stepped backward, his breathing becoming uneven now. Shock, pain, disbelief. Then suddenly, anger exploded across his face for one brief second. Not hatred, the uncontrollable rage of a terrified father. "You left him alone?" The hallway became silent instantly. Dilafruz cried harder, collapsing emotionally. "I didn't mean, but you did!" Those words echoed brutally through the corridor, and immediately afterward, Azizabek regretted shouting, because suddenly he saw something horrifying in his wife's face. She already hated herself more than anyone else possibly could. Before another word could be spoken, the emergency room doors opened. Both parents turned instantly. A doctor stepped out slowly, removing gloves. Serious face, exhausted eyes. Silence filled the hallway heavily. Then the doctor finally spoke quietly. "He's alive." Both parents collapsed emotionally immediately. Dilafruz cried into her hands violently. Azizabek closed his eyes, shaking with relief. But the doctor continued carefully. He was underwater too long. Silence again. Dangerous silence. "We don't know yet if there will be neurological damage." Those words shattered hope instantly, because suddenly, survival itself was no longer the only fear. Now came another terrifying possibility, that one distracted moment might affect their son forever. Dilafruz physically could not breathe hearing those words, her entire body shaking uncontrollably now, because for the first time she fully understood something devastating. Phones steal attention quietly, but consequences arrive loudly. That night, inside intensive care, tiny Yusuf lay motionless, connected to machines, small chest rising slowly, tiny fingers still. And beside the hospital bed, two broken parents sat silently, realizing life would never feel ordinary again after this day. The next few days became a nightmare without sleep. Hospital lights, machine sounds, doctors walking in and out endlessly, and little Yusuf still lying silently inside intensive care. The cheerful baby who once filled the house with laughter now barely moved, tiny oxygen tubes near his face, small heartbeat monitor glowing beside the bed. Everything looked fragile, painfully fragile. Dilafruz never left his side, not once. She sat beside the hospital bed day and night, holding Yusuf's tiny hand carefully, as if letting go would somehow make things worse. She stopped eating properly, stopped checking messages, stopped touching her phone completely. The same device that once consumed hours of her attention now stayed abandoned inside her bag, untouched. Because suddenly, nothing online mattered anymore. Nothing. Only Yusuf. Only whether he would wake up normally again. But guilt became unbearable. Every time Dilafruz closed her eyes, she saw the same image again. Tiny sandals floating on the water, and every replay felt like punishment. One morning, a doctor finally spoke with them privately. Serious face, careful voice. His condition is stable now. Relief briefly entered the room. Then the doctor continued, but we still need time to understand if there was damage caused by lack of oxygen. Silence. Heavy, terrifying silence. Dilafruz felt physically sick again, because every sentence now sounded like a reminder. One distracted moment nearly stole her child's future forever. Azizbek changed too after the accident. Quieter, more protective, more tired emotionally. At first, anger toward Dilafruz burned strongly inside him, because fathers imagine terrifying scenarios repeatedly after almost losing a child. But slowly, anger turned into sadness instead, because every time he looked at his wife now, he saw a woman already destroying herself with guilt. One night, Azizbek woke up suddenly inside the hospital chair beside Yusuf's bed and froze, because Dilafruz sat on the floor silently crying into Yusuf's tiny blanket, trying not to make noise, trying not to wake anyone, but broken completely inside. Azizbek slowly walked toward her, carefully, then quietly asked, "Why are you sitting here?" Dilafruz couldn't even look at him. Her voice barely worked now. "Because I don't deserve to sit beside him." Those words shattered Azizbek internally, because suddenly he understood something painful. The accident didn't only almost drown their son, it drowned Dilafruz in guilt too. She began blaming herself for every tiny thing now, every cough Yusuf made, every machine sound, every doctor expression. Everything felt like punishment. A few days later, Dilafruz accidentally opened Instagram for the first time since the accident, only for 1 second, and instantly videos began playing automatically. Mothers dancing, funny reels, perfect family moments, people smiling online like life was simple. Dilafruz stared at the screen silently. Then, suddenly, she threw the phone across the hospital room violently. The sound shocked everyone nearby, because now she no longer saw entertainment in those videos, only distraction, only the moment she stopped watching her child. That night, while Yusuf finally slept peacefully after treatment, Dilafruz leaned close to him, crying softly, tiny tears falling onto the blanket, and through broken whispers, she repeated the same sentence over and over. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Because some mistakes happen in seconds, but parents carry them for the rest of their lives. Then, suddenly, for the first time since the accident, tiny Yusuf moved his fingers weakly around hers. Very small movement, almost nothing. But to Dilafruz, it felt like life itself returning. She cried harder immediately, not from fear this time, from relief. Because deep down, she knew she was being given something many parents never receive after tragedy: another chance. Weeks passed slowly after the accident, and little Yusuf finally began recovering. Not quickly, not easily, but enough to bring hope back into the hospital room again. The doctors smiled more often now. Machines disappeared one by one, the oxygen tubes removed carefully, and for the first time since that terrible day, Yusuf laughed softly again while holding his father's finger. That tiny laugh made both parents cry immediately, because they now understood something many people realized too late. Ordinary moments are actually miracles. Simple laughter, tiny footsteps, baby voices, all priceless. Meanwhile, Dilafruz completely changed, not temporarily, deeply. The woman who once spent hours lost inside endless scrolling now spent every second truly watching her child, listening, holding him, protecting him, learning again how precious attention really is. One afternoon, after returning home from the hospital, Dilafruz walked slowly through the quiet house. Everything looked the same: the couch, the toys, the open back door. And outside, the small inflatable pool still stood near the garden, empty now, folded, but seeing it made her knees weak instantly, because some objects become permanent reminders of pain. Azizbek quietly removed the pool later that evening without saying anything. Neither of them wanted to see it again. Life slowly returned to normal afterward, but not the old normal, a wiser one, a more careful one. One evening, while Yusuf slept peacefully beside them, Dilafruz opened her phone camera quietly. Azizbek looked at her surprised. "What are you doing?" Dilafruz stared at the screen silently for a moment, then softly answered, "I want other parents to hear this before it's too late." And for the first time since the accident, she recorded a video. Not makeup tutorials, not funny reels, not perfect family moments. Truth, painful truth. Inside the emotional video, Dilafruz spoke through tears, honestly, about distraction, about addiction to scrolling, about hearing tiny silence too late. And as she cried quietly, Azizbek held sleeping Yusuf closer beside her, because both understood now this story was not only theirs, it could happen to anyone. Days later, the video spread everywhere online. Millions watched. Thousands of parents cried in the comments. Many admitted they also spent too much time distracted by phones around their children. Others wrote, "I put my phone down after watching this. Thank you for saving another child." And suddenly, Dilafruz realized something powerful. The same internet that once distracted her from motherhood could now help warn other families too. One night, while rocking Yusuf gently to sleep, Dilafruz whispered softly against his tiny hair, "You saved me too." Because almost losing him awakened something inside her: real presence, real motherhood, real understanding of what truly matters. Outside, the world still scrolled endlessly: videos, notifications, perfect fake lives. But inside one quiet house, a mother had learned a painful truth forever. Children do not need perfect parents. They need present parents. Dear parents, please remember this. Phones can wait. Messages can wait. Social media can wait. But children grow up fast, and accidents happen silently. One distracted moment can change an entire life forever. Please, let your child always be your first priority, because no video online is more important than the little life beside you. And sometimes, the most dangerous sound in a home is sudden silence. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because some stories are not only for emotion, they are warnings that can save lives. Life slowly returned to the house again, but nothing truly felt the same anymore. Not for Azizbek, not for Dilafruz, and especially not for little Yusuf. At first, the doctors called it normal trauma. Children remember fear differently. not through words, through reactions, sounds, feelings. And Yusuf had changed after the accident. Before, he loved water. Tiny baths made him laugh loudly. He splashed happily with his small hands. But now, everything changed. The first time De La Fruz tried bathing him again after the hospital, Yusuf immediately started crying violently. Real panic. Tiny hands shaking, trying desperately to climb out of the water. De La Fruz froze emotionally, because suddenly she realized something heartbreaking. Her baby remembered. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere inside his tiny body, fear remained. Azizbek gently lifted Yusuf from the tub immediately, holding him close while the baby cried against his shoulder. And De La Fruz collapsed onto the bathroom floor, crying silently again. Because trauma does not end when survival begins. Sometimes it stays quietly inside families forever. That night, De La Fruz couldn't sleep at all. She watched Yusuf breathing beside her for hours, tiny chest rising softly, safe, alive. And yet, fear still sat heavily inside her heart. What if another accident happened someday? What if next time she wasn't lucky enough for a second chance? That thought nearly destroyed her mentally. The next morning, De La Fruz did something unexpected. She deleted Instagram, then TikTok, then every social media app consuming her attention for years. Not dramatically, quietly, like removing poison from her life. Azizbek watched silently from the kitchen doorway. "You don't have to delete everything," he said softly. De La Fruz looked at her phone for several seconds, then whispered painfully, "I almost lost my son because I stopped noticing real life." Those words silenced the entire room, because deep down, both parents knew the truth. Technology itself wasn't evil, but addiction to distraction was, and millions of parents were drowning inside it every day without realizing. Later that afternoon, De La Fruz took Yusuf outside into the garden carefully. Warm sunlight covered the yard softly, birds singing again, peaceful. But when Yusuf saw the empty corner where the pool once stood, he suddenly became quiet, then slowly crawled toward De La Fruz instead, clinging tightly to her leg, seeking safety. De La Fruz immediately picked him up emotionally, holding him close, and for the first time in months, she truly understood motherhood differently. Not as beautiful photos, not matching outfits, not online perfection. Protection, presence, attention. That evening, while Yusuf finally slept peacefully between them, Azizbek quietly held De La Fruz's hand for the first time since the accident. Small gesture, but meaningful. Because slowly, both of them were learning how to survive the guilt together instead of separately. Then softly, Azizbek whispered, "We almost lost everything." De La Fruz's eyes instantly filled with tears again, but Azizbek gently squeezed her hand tighter before she could apologize. "No more blaming yourself every second," he said quietly. "We need to become better parents now, not broken parents forever." Those words changed something inside De La Fruz deeply, because for weeks she only punished herself emotionally. Now, for the first time, she began thinking about healing too. And somewhere inside the quiet, dark room, while their baby slept safely beside them, a broken family slowly began rebuilding itself again. Several weeks passed after De La Fruz posted her emotional video online, and unexpectedly, millions of people watched it. Not because of perfect editing, not because of music, because pain speaks honestly. Parents everywhere saw real fear in her eyes, real regret, real motherhood. Thousands of comments appeared beneath the video every day. Some mothers cried while watching. Some fathers hugged their children afterward. Others admitted something painful. They too spent too much time lost inside phones while their children waited nearby. Delafruz read many comments silently at night while Yusuf slept beside her safely. But one message changed everything. It arrived late after midnight, from an unknown woman, simple profile picture, no followers, no videos, only one message. And the moment Delafruz opened it, her heart stopped. The message read, "I wish I saw your video 1 year earlier." Delafruz frowned slightly, then continued reading. "My daughter wasn't as lucky as your son." The room suddenly felt cold, very cold. Hands trembling now, Delafruz kept reading slowly. "She was 2 years old. I looked away for only a few minutes while watching videos. She walked outside alone. There was a road near our house." Silence filled the dark bedroom. Delafruz could barely breathe now. The message continued. "A car hit her before I even realized she was gone." Tears instantly filled Delafruz's eyes, because suddenly another mother's nightmare entered her heart too. The woman wrote, "People blamed me, my husband blamed me, but nobody blamed me more than I blamed myself." Delafruz covered her mouth, crying silently, because every sentence felt painfully familiar. Then came the final part of the message, the part completely breaking her emotionally. "Please continue warning parents. If your story saves even one child, then your pain became something meaningful." Delafruz cried harder than she had in weeks, not only for herself now, for all distracted parents, for children silently endangered while adults disappear inside screens, for mothers carrying guilt forever, for fathers arriving too late, for tiny lives depending completely on adult attention. Beside her, little Yusuf slept peacefully, hugging a small toy against his chest, alive, warm, breathing softly. And suddenly, Delafruz realized something terrifying. Many parents never receive second chances. She quietly climbed beside Yusuf and held him tightly while crying into his hair. Azizbek woke up slowly beside them, immediately noticing her tears. "What happened?" he whispered softly. Delafruz handed him the message silently. Azizbek read every word carefully, and when he finished, he closed his eyes painfully. Because suddenly, their story no longer felt like only a family accident. It felt like a warning for the entire modern world. The next morning, Delafruz made another video. No makeup, no filters, only honesty. Holding Yusuf close against her chest, she looked directly into the camera and spoke through tears. "Please, when your child calls you, look at them before your phone." Silence. Then softly, she added, "Because some parents only realize what truly matters after silence enters the house." The video spread even faster than the first one. Millions watched, millions shared it. And somewhere far away, another tired mother quietly put her phone down and hugged her child tighter that night. Months passed after the accident, and slowly, life became calmer again. Yusuf grew stronger every day. His laughter returned fully. Tiny footsteps finally filled the house again. The dark hospital days slowly became distant memories. But fear never completely left Delafruz, not even for 1 second, because parents who almost lose a child never relax the same way again. Now, she watched Yusuf constantly, too constantly sometimes. If he became quiet for even 10 seconds, panic immediately entered her chest. Azizbek noticed it too. One evening, he gently held her shoulders and whispered, "He's safe now. Dilafruz nodded softly, but deep down, her mind still replayed that pool every single day. Then, one terrifying afternoon, the fear returned. The family visited a crowded shopping mall together for the first time in months. Bright lights, music, children running everywhere, normal life. Yusuf sat happily inside the shopping cart, pointing excitedly at colorful balloons hanging above the store. For the first time in a long while, Dilafruz smiled peacefully again. Maybe life truly was becoming normal. Then, suddenly, Azizbek received an urgent work phone call. He stepped aside briefly near the entrance, talking seriously. At the same moment, a woman nearby accidentally dropped several bags onto the floor. Without thinking, Dilafruz bent down to help her pick everything up. Only seconds, very small moment. But suddenly, silence appeared again. That terrifying silence. No baby sounds, no laughter, nothing. Dilafruz froze instantly. Her heart stopped. Slowly, she turned toward the shopping cart. Empty. Yusuf was gone. Panic exploded violently inside her chest. Yusuf! Security immediately turned around. Dilafruz began searching wildly through the crowded mall, eyes shaking, breathing uneven, mind collapsing into pure terror. Because suddenly she was back inside the nightmare again. Another moment, another disappearance, another chance to lose him forever. Yusuf! Azizbek heard the screaming and ran toward her immediately. What happened? Dilafruz could barely speak now. He was right here! He was right here! The entire mall suddenly became chaos. Security guards moved quickly, workers locked exits, people searching everywhere, and Dilafruz completely broke down emotionally. Because the fear this time felt even worse. Not because of distraction, because trauma had already taught her exactly how quickly tragedy happens. Minutes felt like hours. Then, suddenly, a security guard's voice echoed through the speaker. We found the child. Dilafruz nearly collapsed instantly. Security led them toward a toy store nearby. And there, little Yusuf stood smiling innocently beside giant teddy bears. Safe, completely safe. The baby had simply climbed out of the cart and followed colorful balloons into the toy shop, too young to understand danger. Dilafruz immediately grabbed him tightly into her arms, crying uncontrollably, holding him so close he almost couldn't move. Yusuf only blinked confusedly, not understanding why his mother cried so hard. Azizbek wrapped both of them into his arms quietly, and inside the crowded, noisy mall, their small family stood together, shaking with relief. That night, after Yusuf finally fell asleep safely at home, Dilafruz sat silently beside his bed for hours again, then softly whispered through tears, I promise, I will never stop watching over you. Because once life teaches parents how fragile children truly are, ordinary moments never feel ordinary again. A year passed after the accident, and little Yusuf grew into a healthy, cheerful toddler again, running through the house, laughing loudly, making endless messes everywhere. Life finally looked normal from the outside again. But inside, Dilafruz, everything had changed forever. Now, every moment with Yusuf felt precious. Every laugh, every hug, every tiny voice calling, Anajan. Because once parents almost lose a child, they understand time differently. One morning, Dilafruz received an unexpected invitation from a local kindergarten. The principal had watched her viral video online, and now they wanted her to speak during a parents' meeting about child safety and digital distraction. At first, Dilafruz immediately refused. I'm not a speaker, she whispered nervously, but Azizbek gently encouraged her. Maybe another child needs to hear your story. Those words stayed inside her heart. And a few days later, Dilafruz stood nervously inside a large kindergarten hall filled with parents, mothers holding phones, fathers checking messages, children running between chairs, laughing innocently. Normal scene, very normal. And suddenly, Dilafruz realized something terrifying. Most parents in the room probably believed tragedy only happened to other people, just like she once believed. Her hands trembled while walking toward the microphone. The room slowly became quiet. Then, softly, she began speaking. "A year ago, I almost lost my son." Instant silence filled the hall. No phones moving now, no whispers, only attention, real attention. Dilafruz continued slowly, through shaking breath, through painful memories. She spoke about the pool, the tiny sandals floating in water, the silence, the hospital, the guilt. And while she spoke, many parents slowly lowered their phones onto their laps without realizing. Some mothers already wiped tears quietly, because deep down, every parent fears the exact same nightmare. Then Dilafruz looked directly across the room and whispered the sentence breaking everyone emotionally. "My son almost died because I gave more attention to strangers online than my own child beside me." The room became painfully silent. One father slowly hugged his little daughter tighter, hearing that. A mother quietly turned off her phone completely. And suddenly, Dilafruz realized this speech was no longer about shame. It was about warning, saving, preventing another tragedy before it happens. Then she softly added, "Children don't ask for perfect parents." Pause. "They ask for present parents." Several people openly cried now because the truth hurt, painfully hurt. At the back of the hall, Azizbek stood silently watching his wife proudly, because the broken, guilty woman from the hospital days had transformed into someone helping protect other families now. And beside him, little Yusuf laughed while playing with a toy car, completely unaware that his tiny life had changed hundreds of parents already. At the end of the speech, the entire room stood up applauding emotionally, not for performance, for honesty. One mother approached Dilafruz afterward, crying, "I watched your story and removed the pool from our yard." Another father whispered, "I stopped using my phone during dinner because of you." And suddenly, Dilafruz understood something powerful. Sometimes, the most painful mistakes become warnings that save other people. That evening, while putting Yusuf to sleep, Dilafruz kissed his forehead softly and whispered, "You gave my life purpose again." Because almost losing him taught her the most important lesson of motherhood. Nothing online matters more than the little human calling you mom. A year passed after the accident, and little Yusuf grew into a healthy, cheerful toddler again, running through the house, laughing loudly, making endless messes everywhere. Life finally looked normal from the outside again. But inside, Dilafruz, everything had changed forever. Now, every moment with Yusuf felt precious. Every laugh, every hug, every tiny voice calling, "Anna John." Because once parents almost lose a child, they understand time differently. One morning, Dilafruz received an unexpected invitation from a local kindergarten. The principal had watched her viral video online, and now they wanted her to speak during a parents' meeting about child safety and digital distraction. At first, Dilafruz immediately refused. "I'm not a speaker," she whispered nervously, but Azizbek gently encouraged her. "Maybe another child needs to hear your story." Those words stayed inside her heart. And a few days later, Dilafruz stood nervously inside a large kindergarten hall filled with parents, mothers holding phones, fathers checking messages, children running between chairs, laughing innocently. Normal scene, very normal. And suddenly, Dilafruz realized something terrifying. Most parents in the room probably believed tragedy only happened to other people, just like she once believed. Her hands trembled while walking toward the microphone. The room slowly became quiet. Then, softly, she began speaking. "A year ago, I almost lost my son." Instant silence filled the hall. No phones moving now, no whispers, only attention, real attention. Dilafruz continued slowly, through shaking breath, through painful memories. She spoke about the pool, the tiny sandals floating in water, the silence, the hospital, the guilt. And while she spoke, many parents slowly lowered their phones onto their laps without realizing. Some mothers already wiped tears quietly, because deep down, every parent fears the exact same nightmare. Then Dilafruz looked directly across the room and whispered the sentence breaking everyone emotionally. "My son almost died because I gave more attention to strangers online than my own child beside me." The room became painfully silent. One father slowly hugged his little daughter tighter, hearing that. A mother quietly turned off her phone completely. And suddenly, Dilafruz realized this speech was no longer about shame. It was about warning, saving, preventing another tragedy before it happens. Then she softly added, "Children don't ask for perfect parents." Pause. "They ask for present parents." Several people openly cried now because the truth hurt, painfully hurt. At the back of the hall, Azizbek stood silently watching his wife proudly, because the broken, guilty woman from the hospital days had transformed into someone helping protect other families now. And beside him, little Yusuf laughed while playing with a toy car, completely unaware that his tiny life had changed hundreds of parents already. At the end of the speech, the entire room stood up applauding emotionally, not for performance, for honesty. One mother approached Dilafruz afterward, crying, "I watched your story and removed the pool from our yard." Another father whispered, "I stopped using my phone during dinner because of you." And suddenly, Dilafruz understood something powerful. Sometimes, the most painful mistakes become warnings that save other people. That evening, while putting Yusuf to sleep, Dilafruz kissed his forehead softly and whispered, "You gave my life purpose again." Because almost losing him taught her the most important lesson of motherhood. Nothing online matters more than the little human calling you mom.